I'm joined by the Shadow Home Secretary now here in Liverpool, Yvette Cooper. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Hello. We used to talk about Thatcher's children. Do you accept some responsibility for the riots this summer? Because in a sense, they were Labour's children.
Well, I think you should always do more, go further to get people out of the life of crime. And it was shocking what happened in the summer. I think you have to recognise that crime fell by 40% during Labour's period. And that included fewer young people before the riots, fewer young people going into crime, fewer young offenders.
But we ended up with riots of people who had grown up, not all of them obviously, but most of them were in that kind of age group, that their formative experience, their school, their early life had been under a Labour government. They were Labour's children.
And that's right. And the fact that there have been fewer young offenders, I think is important progress. But of course it's the case that there were a lot of those young people, a lot of those people in their 20s, because some of them were also older, who we have not managed to stop getting into a life of crime. And that's why I think you always have to do more. That's why I would like to see a strong implementation of some of the work being done in Boston, being done in Hackney, that really targets the gangs. We've set out ways, for example, that you could fund that, and the government could start doing that now, so you don't have any repeat of the violence next summer.
But when you boasted today, as you did in your speech, you've done again now, about the fall in crime under Labour, in the last Labour government, that has to be caveated by the fact that it ended in the worst rioting we've seen for a generation.
This summer. And it was interesting, I spoke to police officers during the few months before the summer, and they said, in fact, interestingly, that they were worried, even before the summer started, about public order pressures, about the fear of a long, hot summer.
Did they have a sense that something was going to happen?
Yes, I had several senior police officers who were worried, had a sense that something was going to happen.
It's interesting because for everyone else it came as a surprise, didn't it?
Exactly, and it
for
came
the
as such a
media
shock.
As much as the politicians.
Exactly, and you do see, it was people who were out of control, who were, off the rails, and, the sense as well, the interesting thing too, that I think the fact that the police weren't able to hold the streets on the first night, it just escalated. More and more criminals got involved because they thought they could get away with it. They thought that the law would not be enforced.
If they saw
and that's
a
why
long,
I
hot
think
summer,
it's so important to get the number of police up.
But if you saw it was a long, hot summer, it's all the more surprising that they left us undefended on the first night.
Well, I think it's interesting. I don't think the police had anticipated how fast the rioters would gather. One police officer said to me he had never in a 20-year career seen a crowd gather that fast. And that's, social media, rolling news. But it does mean, I think you've got to be able to respond to that. The police, if criminals can gather quickly, the police need to gather quickly, and that means it's madness to make 16,000 police officer cuts.
Now, you've set up this commission on the future of policing, but you've chosen John Stevens. He's already attacked the government's idea of elected police commissioners. He was an advisor to Gordon Brown on international criminal matters. You've picked Tim Brain, who's criticised the government cuts already. Sounds a bit like this so-called independent commission is full of people who've already kind of made up their minds that what the coalition's doing is wrong and what you'll be doing is right.
Well, I think first of all,
not very independent.
Well, first of all, I think Lord John Stevens is a crossbencher in the House of Lords with, I think, a long independent reputation, and indeed has done some
government policy.
Well, indeed. Well, that's the point I was going to make, because
is that why you picked him?
No, I think all the police are attacking government policy.
That
actually, it is very, very easy to find, not just police officers, but experts on crime, experts on how to bring crime down, all saying that what the government's doing is madness.
But as you will know, when the public sector gets united to attack those trying to reform it, as Mr. Blair reminded us, you end up with scars on your back. So it doesn't make them wrong.
Well, the interesting thing is I can't find anybody who supports what the government is doing, anybody who supports 16,000 cuts to police officers, anybody who supports, this sort of substantial reorganisation and chaos that they're proposing in the police force at the moment, rather than a sensible, big vision and a reform for the future.
You speak, though, to policemen, not just police officers, senior policemen. You speak to ordinary, and I do get a chance, particularly these conferences, you get a chance. I get a sense, I don't know if there's a crying need of the police feel, ordinary policemen, for a better quality of leadership and a better way that their leaders are appointed. Do you sense that?
Well, I think there's some excellent police leaders. I think, of course, in the 21st century, what you want is to be able to draw on the best leadership, to promote people fast and to have flexibility as well. So I'm sure that issues around professionalisation, around workforce, will be things that will be covered as part of this review. But I think there's been a bit of a tendency for the government ministers to really try and undermine the police in the way they've been handling this and play it being armchair constables.
You think the government ministers are out to undermine the police?
I think that some of the things I think some of the things they have been doing were doing exactly that. At that time,
because
during
I think
August,
they have no faith in a lot of police chiefs.
I think during that period in August, when it was, things were really, seemed to be tipping over the edge, and we were all very concerned, exactly. That Tuesday, when we didn't know whether the violence would be repeated, at that time, we should all have been backing the police and backing respect for the police and the rule of law. I think the way they handled that, actually, the way they seemed to be knocking the police in those very sensitive few days, actually was undermining the respect in the police at a time when we needed it most.
All right. Now, the big issue of this conference, Yvette Cooper, is the claim by your husband that in the event of another leadership contest, he will stand aside for you. Do you believe him?
In fact, what he said, I think, in that interview, was that he said his view was that Ed Miliband was doing a great job and would carry on being leader for very many years to come.
But he also said he didn't want to run for leadership again, should it ever arise, and that he would stand aside for you. Now, can you really take his word on that?
Well, look, I mean, that's actually what he said to me before when we had the last leadership.
Yeah, but he ran and you didn't.
But that's because I decided.
See, these husbands, you just can't trust them, can you? So you don't think your husband will run again as leader?
I don't think so. I think he's
done that, been there, done it, didn't quite get it, but enjoying himself as shadow chancellor.
He's working very hard and he's doing a good job.
But you haven't ruled yourself out.
I think,
people like me always say that at this time. You don't
always say that.
You don't need to reply because we know the answer already. Yvette Cooper, thanks for being with us.